For 5 years, Luther labored without relief. Then, in 1510, he was offered an escape from his cloistered life. He was sent by his order on a mission to Rome, one of the Church's greatest pilgrimages. It took a full 2 months for Luther and his companion to make the long journey south. And then, in October of 1510, they finally arrived at the Eternal City. Luther arrived in Rome just as the Renaissance was reaching its height. Michelangelo was painting the ceilings of the Sistine Chapel. Raphael was hard at work decorating the Pope's private apartments. To the young monk, the city was a revelation. Luther also discovered that the Church was happy to profit from its pilgrims. For a fee, he was allowed to enter the crypt of the Church of Santa Calliste. Here, he could view the remains of 46,000 Christian martyrs. This would earn him what was called an indulgence, releasing him from time and purgatory after death. Purgatory was where Christians would have their sins burned out of them for what could be thousands of years before they were finally allowed to enter heaven. The chance to buy time off from purgatory was an extremely attractive offer for the faithful, and very profitable for the Church. But as Luther trekked from one pilgrimage site to another, desperate to find salvation, he was overtaken by a steadily mounting fear. Could all this really bring him closer to God? Until finally it is said that Luther collapsed, questioning for the first time the teachings of the Church to which he had vowed his life.
Who knows if it is really so?
Seven years had passed since Luther's visit to Rome. In that time, Pope Julius II had died. He was succeeded by Leo X. And Leo was a man devoted to the pleasures of the flesh. At his dinner parties, he would regularly serve a great cake from which would leap little naked boys. Within 2 years of sumptuous festivals and wild boar hunts, Leo had emptied the papal treasuries. He was forced to halt work on the Church's greatest extravagance yet, the glorious Basilica of St. Peter's. To refill his treasuries, he turned to one of the Church's most proven methods for raising money: selling indulgences, charging the faithful for entry into heaven.
This indulgence was basically a piece of paper sold for a very appropriate sum of money, incidentally adjusted to your means, which promised to pay the bearer on demand forgiveness of sins.
Leo's indulgence had a number of unique benefits. You could buy one not just for yourself, but also for your dead relatives. And it pardoned an astonishing array of sins. It was said that it would even forgive sexual intercourse with the Virgin Mary, had that been possible. Here was salvation in exchange for a sum. Leo made careful preparations for the issuing of his new indulgence. He brought in a Dominican friar called Johann Tetzel to handle the sales and PR. He had chosen well.
Tetzel was a marvelous advertising executive who had a wonderful line in promotional jingles and slogans. He almost invented the advertising jingle, you see. He would say, "When the coin in his coffer rings, then the soul heavenward wings." See, you can actually see the soul escalating to heaven from purgatory.
Leo waited for his empty coffers to fill with the donations of the faithful. Tetzel's main market for selling the new indulgence was Germany. And the people of Wittenberg quickly heard about the bargain deal that the church was offering on redemption. Luther found that many of his congregation had turned away from his sermons and were rushing to spend their hard-earned money on Tetzel's offer. But for Luther, his moment of revelation had left him with one simple message. Salvation was a gift from God, a gift received through faith. And that meant the church had no right to sell redemption.
People's lives are at stake. If they get this wrong, they can go to hell.
This monk, who had once been the church's most devoted servant, now turned on the institution to which he had vowed his life. On the evening of the 31st of October, 1517, Luther sat down and penned a furious litany of criticism, 95 stinging bullet points, or theses, that lashed into the Pope and the trade in indulgences. Then he nailed them to the door of Wittenberg's castle church. It was a blistering attack on the greatest power of the day.
God's blessing is freely available without the keys of the Pope. Indulgences are truly pernicious. They induce complacency and imperil salvation. The Pope is richer than Croesus. He would do better to sell St. Peter's and give the money to the poor people.